Well, I think the first thing was obviously there were 4 of us playing a lot of different characters. So we were doing a lot of multi-rolling. And also our version was abridged. So there were certain bits that were left out to make it the length that we needed it to be. That I think was the biggest thing that had an impact for me in terms of the kind of characters I play and that kind of thing, because as well as playing Witch 2, I was also playing Witch 3, who's the little puppet. And I found that really fascinating because I think obviously it was born out of necessity, but I think it just works so well to create this eerie, creepy feel about the witches. Because I always find this when you're reading the play, it's really hard to pin down, well, what do they look like? Who are they? And actually, I think maintaining that just kind of really weird, supernatural, not quite sure what's going on behind the mask. Are they being controlled by people? And I think having a little puppet like that, just automatically the audience can feel kind of a little bit creeped out, which I think is exactly how it should feel when you see the witches for the first time.
Yeah, like going off that, I think having it set pretty much on an army base and having everyone constantly in uniform, and even though some people were wearing tartan trousers, checkered shirts, it kind of linked back to Scotland, so that the audience knew firmly where we were in the country. But because everything was like covered in camo and it just felt so wartime, like throughout the play, it kind of added that intensity and stakes that I think could have been lost if it wasn't, because I think people were constantly drawn back to the fact that we are at war, and it's never ending.
Absolutely, and one of the things I love about that is that war, if you're a soldier, and many of the characters in the play are, if you're a soldier, war is an intensely honourable thing. You're fighting for an honourable cause. And what our production did, and sometimes by necessity, of course, because there were things that had to be moved, there were things that had to be cut. And there were also a couple of speeches that Macbeth had at the beginning, which were maybe partly Macbeth's, but he'd also be reading a letter from Duncan. And because we changed the context of that from being in an audience with Duncan to Macbeth being on his own, I mean, whenever a character is on their own, they always speak with honesty. Even if they're trying to fool themselves, it's always an honest way of doing it. And so Macbeth's reaction to Duncan becomes one that's absolutely from the heart. He means everything he says when he says, our duty is towards the throne and state by doing everything safe towards your love and honour. And he absolutely crystal clearly means that. And therefore you really establish him as this honourable person, which he absolutely has to be at the beginning of the play, which makes his fall so much more pronounced and so much more fatal when you're on this almost pedestal in terms of how you view yourself and how you view others around you, that it makes the tragedy just so much worse when you see what happens to him.
And also I think when you're talking about like a character's journey, in our version, Macduff comes on and has the speech originally by the kind of bloodied soldier, lauding Macbeth and telling Duncan how amazing Macbeth has been. And I think that's really important as well for kind of Macduff's arc, because at the beginning, Macduff really does believe that, as you said, that he respects Macbeth, thinks he's an awesome general. And obviously, by the end of the play, in a very different situation. And so to see that journey as well, where Macduff kind of starts to put 2 and 2 together and resist the temptation to kind of stay with Macbeth, I think was really interesting to see in this production.